So I'll begin the session. Okay. Let me share my screen. So anyone wants to do a recap of what we did yesterday?
Ravi, if possible, please. Yeah.
Yes, yes, please small recall.
Okay, fine. So fine. So yesterday, the first thing we talked about OAuth. What is OAuth? Open authorization, a protocol that is used primarily for authorization purpose. Okay. So far, when we discussed about SAML, it was an authentication protocol. OAuth is a authorization protocol. Okay. Second, why do organization use OAuth? Organization use OAuth primarily from an to increase the security, to have a very developer friendly setup whenever they have mobile based applications. These are the main three reasons, right? And then again, fourth and obvious one is if they want to just perform authorization, because if you are using authorization, it doesn't. So for example, in a scenario where we try to log into Ghana, right, using Google. So here Ghana used some information, few information from Google, and let you log into this particular application. So in this entire process, Ghana has just few set of information, not everything that Google carries. So tomorrow if Ghana gets compromised, Google will, the password and other information that you have on Google remain safe. That is one of the main important thing that OAuth guarantees, that it will give you a very limited set of access required for you to authorize into that application, and not everything. Okay, so these are some of the main reasons. Now, how does OAuth work? OAuth work based on connectivity, or by interacting with few components. The first component that you have is a client. Client is the application. Then you have a bundle which is termed as the authorization server. Under authorization server, you have multiple endpoints: authorization endpoint, token endpoint, right? User info endpoint. Fine. So based on this, you actually this is the systems that OAuth interacts with. Here we spoke about the different types of flow. We have the auth code, which is used very often, 90% of the time in organization, and then an enhancement to here at auth code with Pixie. Further, if you want to enhance, you have Depop, which has recently, it has a RFC, so you can check that out. Then you have implicit, right? Then you have client credential flow, and then you have resource owner password grant, and you have other flows like token flow, device client flow, refresh token flow. These are the things that would complement to these main flows. Okay. After that, we spoke about how these flows interact with each other. How do they work? Okay. So the first one where we discussed is auth code. Auth code works basically in the principle where it does a token code to token exchange. So if you have a client here, you have these endpoint, auth endpoint, token endpoint. Client will send a request to auth endpoint saying, give me a code. It gives them back a code. It goes to the token endpoint with the same code and says, give me the token. It gives them the token. Implicit, it'll directly go to the auth endpoint and say, give me a token. It'll give them back a token. And in all these cases, the only token that you'll be using in case of OAuth is access token and refresh token.
Ravi, one question here.
Yes.
So why did we first go to code and then get the token?
This is to, no, when you say again, client is not the client user, it is the application team, application that you're using. Client refers to
No.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I get that, but
Mm.
like in this flow, like why did we get first the code and then code exchanging the code we got the token, right? So what was the use of code?
Mainly to increase security. Whenever it's a three-legged flow that you go request for some information and then do a exchange based on this information, this is basically you're enhancing the security level. I mean, if you
Okay.
go, excuse me, now tomorrow if a hacker gets the code, if they are not able to make a call to the token endpoint because it is spoofed. Code does not have any user information, right? But if you request for a code in between, someone kind of did a man in the middle attack or sniff the token, that token has all the user information. So that is where auth code, hence I started earlier that auth code with Pixie, these are very commonly used in organization level. But other flows, right, like implicit and those kind of things are not used much by organization. I mean, yes, for testing purposes and all, it's fine, but not very oftenly directly over the internet. I mean, I've gone deep into these one.
So
Auth
Ravi,
code,
is it
yeah.
true that auth code provide a short-lived token compared to like access token, which is a long-lived? Uh, is that right statement?
So token, basically you can decide the lifetime of the token. It is by default the token length is this, which is
Okay.
1 hour. Okay. Now, if you want to change the token lifetime, that is all up to you and the configuration. But yes, compared to when you talk about SAML, right, and a token based, SAML is assertion based, this is token based. So here you have more control compared to an assertion based. Here you have to go and make changes in the session length and all of this. Okay. But there also you can do. But here you don't have to do anything on the token. Just simply limit the token and you're through there. Okay, you don't have to do anything on that. Even if the user has session for other application, all of this, but if the token is only 1 hour, after that they have to request use this refresh token and request for a new set of access and refresh token, provided again certain checks are being met. But by default, you start off with an hour and then you can increase, decrease the token length. Okay,
Thank
and
you.
this goes in for access token or ID token, which we'll discuss in the coming session. Okay, so this was implicit. And yeah, it was a very quick, not too much helpful recap. But yeah, I mean, because I have other topics, but all of this, I've covered all of this in our session. Okay. Yeah, I mean, in the yesterday's session, you can go through them and if there are questions pertaining to any of these things, if that is not clear to you, please ask me. I'll be happy to repeat it just to link few of the topics. Okay. So just one sec. But any other questions from anyone? Nothing? Okay. So now we'll talk about another flow, which is resource owner password grant. Okay. So yesterday when I was talking about this whole thing, I sorry, we were talking about a client. Okay. And then the authorization endpoint, token endpoint. So in the auth code, there was a part one and then part two flows. And we also discussed about what do they contain in these flows. Okay, what is the information that they are carrying? The information that they are carrying inside this is called a request parameter, and then there are certain checklist of request parameter. We discussed that we have a client id, a client secret, redirect uri, scope, response type, nonce, state. All these are the different request uh, parameter that you take around while you are doing the interaction. Okay, so now this was the auth code. Now let's talk about what happens in other flows. Okay, which are there. So there are two flows remaining. So OAuth is a protocol. JOT is a type of token, JSON web token. Okay, so these are two different things, and you use these to you use OAuth, uh, and the mechanism in which OAuth communicates is through token, and one of the type of a token is JOT token, like that. Okay, so one sec, let me see if I see few people have been joining. Let me stop presenting. Okay. and just go and look back if I have to admit anyone. Okay, no one. Good. I'll answer the questions towards the end for everyone. Okay, guys. Sorry, my internet just restarted. Sorry for that. Yeah, so now we'll talk about the resource owner password grant flow. Okay, so we spoke about the authorization code flow, we spoke about the implicit. Okay, now let's talk about resource owner password grant. Okay, now where do you use resource owner password grant? Resource owner password grant is basically used for testing purposes, or where you have it in a very internal environments. Okay, restricted environments. Now why? Because the first thing that they do is they will directly make a call to the token endpoint. That is one thing. The client is making a call to the token endpoint. That is the first call that they are making. Now what is contained inside that? They have the authorization, which is authorization header that they have to pass. Header is basically a value that they are passing as a part of the request parameter. It should contain your client ID and client secret. Okay, now client ID and client secret, as we have already discussed, will be generated during the process of integration. When you're integrating an OpenID app or Oauth app, this is where you create the client ID and secret and share it with the application team. They use this, and eventually they will come to you for uh, requesting the set of tokens back from the authorization server. Then on the request parameter, few thing that will pass is grant type. Grant type will be set to, can anyone guess what will be the grant type? This was one of the questions that I asked in a poll a couple of weeks ago. Anyone remembers it? Or put it on the chat. What will be the grant type for a
Code,
resource? Sorry?
code.
No, code is for auth code. For resource owner password grant, what will be the grant type? Hint. Give you a hint also, which is, sorry, just put this. Password, yes, Suresh. You're right. So it is password, Bhavin, Pratima. Yes, it is password. Okay. The grant type is password. And what is a grant type? People who have joined yesterday for implicit flow. Implicit
For implicit, it's token grant.
token. Yes. Token. So we know for auth code, it is code. Okay. So, and these are some of the interview questions, right? And again, a lot of the time I'll see people struggling to solve problem, okay, where they will set some wrong token type, okay. So that is one of the thing. Then you will have to put the username and password of the user that is trying to log in, and the scope is already there, right? And the resource value. So in other flows, right, you may be using client ID secret, put it under a basic authorization header, this little bit also, right? You're not passing it in plain text. That is also fine. But the main reason, as I said, you cannot be doing this uh, exposed to the internet is you're actually passing the user's username and password in this flow. Now, there are use cases. For example, someone uh, wants to perform authorization on behalf of a user. That is one use case that I'm talking. Okay. For example, you have a store and anyone who logs into the store, they have to approve something. Okay. If they, before, if someone is buying and based on the age criteria, if someone is less than 18 years, you cannot sell them something, right? A few of the items. So in order to perform that authorization, they will have to put, the manager has to put their username and password. Now in that flow, they want to make it in a very automated way. They don't want that person to again go and put the username, password, all of this. So to make it seamlessly and to automate that entire process, I have seen organization using this type of flow. But again, make sure that this is done in a very restrictive environment. Okay. So username, password of the user is passed, and hence it is not a good idea to do all this transaction over the internet. Hence, if you want to use it, restrict this in an internal environment and only then try to use password grant flow. Okay. Any question?
Ravi, is it only for the testing purpose, right? Like you mentioned, it is for the testing purpose. So
No.
why, like,
Uh-huh. Yeah, good.
why,
Complete your question.
why is it like we have a different protocol or different flow for the testing itself? Like, what is the advantage over others?
No. That's what. There are use cases where organizations are using it. That is what I'm saying. But
Okay,
recommended is, if someone actually wants to use it, they should be using it only internal only ways, not like just expose everything outside the internet. Okay.
okay.
So
So
now I'll,
password
yeah, good.
password is getting stored in cookies in this case.
Password is actually traveling on the request itself. So if someone
Right.
gets the request, right, everything is gone. Your client ID secret is gone, username and password is gone. And there is again here the another security gap is, unlike the auth code where you go request the code and then get the token to a different endpoint, right? There are two different endpoint. So one
Yep.
thing I just want to talk about all of you is, again, adding to Ish's question, or I think it was Bhavin, right? When you say that why they do code to token exchange. From a best practice perspective, it is always recommended any flow that you do, right? Anything, any system that you're setting it up, and if you have users interacting with that flow, okay, one thing is always make sure that the user does, like, I'll just quickly share my screen. Okay. So one thing that you have to ensure is, if there are two ways that you're trying to set up a system, one is this system, user is interacting for some action. Okay. Some action. And for example, there is this overall some form of activity that the user is performing. Don't restrict this activity to one set of action. Okay. That means if you want a user to set their password, okay, for example, they've lost their password, or for example, if they if you want the user to approve something, use two flow. One is user one does some basic checks here, and if the check is performed well, the user has to go and log into another portal and then only do that action. Now this is a best practice where we call this as closing the loop. Tomorrow, if there is anything, any way in which this authentication or this creds are compromised, right? Only this system gets compromised here, because again, anyone who's trying, right, will not know that they have to again go and do some major action on this particular page. They will say, okay, let me see, this is a password portal or this is a login portal. Let me do everything. Approve portal or something like that, right? So they will go here and they will want to do something, but this will just have basic confirmation, a check kind of thing that this portal will do because you have closed the loop here. Then if this validation is successful, then only you go and do the actual case here. This is kind of tricking the hackers kind of way you can say this, right? Definitely there are different ways in which this can also be bypassed, but this works a lot of time, and this is one of the best practice where you call them as close the loop. Similarly, when you talk about a flow where you first get a code, and based on this code, you're going to a different endpoint to get a token, right? Now this happens on the front channel. Yesterday I did speak about that, right? Front channel in the sense on the browser. When you log into an application on the browser only, you will see code. But when you look about the token, talk about the token generation, this is a back channel flow where the token is generated from the server. All this interaction is happening on the backend. This is happening on the front channel. Hence, auth code does a code to token exchange. Implicit, it directly goes here, requests for a token and gets the token, because implicit, the way it works for application is implicit is only applicable to application where it is a single page application, because they don't have a back channel. They just have a front end, and in front end you do whatever you want. That is also not recommended again. But see, just because it is not recommended doesn't mean that applications will not use it. If their application is not compatible with two-way flow, if it is too complex to build a two-way flow, they will have to go with either of the other flows, right? If they are just doing machine to machine communication, or they really want to pass the username and password, there is no other way, they will have to use ropg. So uh, it's not like none of the flows which provides lesser security is not recommended. Based on the use cases, you have to take extra care about the security measures when you are implementing any of this flow. But all the flows can be implemented based on the use cases. Fine. So now going back to one more thing that I just wanted to share with you guys, which is auth and the way it works, right? Password grant. So I'll show you how the request is flowing. Okay. So yesterday we discussed about this just to give you a background. Yeah. Just to give you a background, yesterday we discussed about this.
No, Ravi, your screen is not visible.
No, I'm just sharing now.
Okay.
Yeah, you can see it now, right? So yesterday we discussed how auth code has two part. One is part one, okay, where the client goes to the authorization endpoint, which is this, okay. Eventually authorization endpoint is nothing but the IDP. Then what do they carry? First is we discussed about, okay, this talk to that, this person, like client talks to a client talks to token endpoint and user info endpoint and all of this, right? But what are they carrying and going and then interacting with? That component is called a request parameter. Okay. Now request parameter will have things like client ID, redirect URI, response type, code in case of auth code, and scope, profile, address, whatever you want them to restrict. That is the information they get. Now when AE is responding back, they will respond with something like this, code and state. Okay. Part two is, again the client has to go to the token endpoint. They will go and hit the token endpoint. They will put grant type as authorization code, and these are again a format, okay, of the request parameter sent across during the interaction. And what do they get back? This is what they get back: access token, expires in, token type, refresh token. Okay. Similarly, let's go and talk about what happens when an application is using a password grant flow. Okay. So I usually follow these documentation here. So the first thing is they will go and uh, make a call. So client makes a call to the token endpoint, okay, which is this. And everywhere you will see slash token is token endpoint, slash auth is auth endpoint. This is how you identify. This remains the same most of the time. Okay, but this will tell you what endpoint it is. Sometime you'll find there as introspection endpoint. there are different endpoints to that also. Okay, this is the first call that they are making, right? Client is making to token endpoint. What information is it going and carrying? So the first is authorization set to basic. Okay, then the other information is content type you have is this. Okay, application form encoded. Then you have the grant type, which is set to password. That is what we discussed about earlier. Grant, once again, let me put this device. Grant underscore type set to password. Okay. Then you have client ID, client secret. Okay. Entering Vinod. Then you have the username, password, scope, all these information, right? When the client would go back, okay, then send a request to the AE, to the authorization endpoint, to the token endpoint. This is again the sample you get. This is how you have to send the entire thing: user, password, client, grant type, all of this. And after the request is being sent, token endpoint will reply to client with this. Access token. Again, the format remains the same. Nothing changes. But if you see the difference between this here, right, the request parameter, and this here, there is no password, there is no username and password. Now, if you go to implicit, this is also going and talking to the auth endpoint and directly saying, give me token, it gives the token. So hence, auth code flow is recommended because you have so many ways in which the loop is closed, means security is enhanced. Okay. Any question before I move on to a different grant type?
Yes, Ravi, I am a little bit confused. Like when you're talking about password and the username, so in implicit and other one, we are first, entering the password and username, and then it is granting us the token.
Yes, you get so for you to get the code in the authorization code, you will get a form. Like from a user experience perspective, you'll have to put your username and password in a form. Okay, that is
Okay.
the user experience. When you talk about ROPG over there, just to automate the entire flow, your username and password is passed on the request parameter. You will not even get the screen.
Okay.
Everything is passed on the request parameter. Hence, see, if you're relying on a human to authenticate, that is definitely best compared to putting everything in a flow and sending it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if the, I mean, that flow can get compromised. But here you can change your password. Uh, you may reset your password, and not someone will directly log in with username and password. There are so many security measures. By default, it is there when you are allowing users to log in, compared to putting all of that in a flow and then sending it across.
Okay.
Okay.
And this where the username and password is mentioned, is it encrypted or is it in the open form?
That is again up to you. How do you want to use it? Most of the time, it is sent normally only in the request, plain text, unless you want to encrypt it.
Okay.
So again, these are some of the reasons, right, why I would not want kind of
Yeah, this to happen over
this to
internet.
happen. Yeah, these are some of the main reasons. So,
Got it.
any other questions from anyone?
Uh, One more thing I wanted to ask, like this, you mentioned this subdomain, one login, then you said about the token and auth, right? Like, could you explain that again above?
Here,
Yeah,
right?
this one. Yeah.
So here again, don't uh, focus too much into this. This most of the time remains the same. This is basically the domain of your company. For example, when you are setting up your endpoint, right, you can go and check any of your endpoint. You will have, say, example company.com. Okay. And this is the name that you want to give to the tool. So this could be company, if you are using this for access management, like you can say IAM or AM. Okay. Or it could
Yeah.
be
But
AM
you said
company.
like in the end you said no, no, this is token, and then you said it was auth something. So
Okay, okay, okay. That is to differentiate between two flows. So this is here, right? So whenever you have this whole flow, the auth represents that this is the auth endpoint, and the token represents on the back end. If you see a token, that is a token endpoint. That is what I was saying. That is how you
okay,
can differentiate two flows. Okay.
okay, got it. Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone? One second. Shubhankar is, but yeah, you can ask your question. No question. So let me move on to the other flow, which is client credential. Client credential basically deals with uh, machine to machine communication. Okay. So when you're talking about machine to machine, in this grant, a specific user is not authorized, but rather the credentials are verified and an access token is returned back, which is a signed JSON web token and can be used for making further API call. One of the best use case of performing this particular flow, can anyone guess what is the best way in which someone, where is client credential used very oftenly? One tool that a lot of the people in the industry use. Let me go
Cell
back.
point integration with Entra ID, we are using it.
Yes, you can use it there also. Cron jobs uh, is a job, right, Pratima? I mean, that is the a type, right? It is the way in which you can use. But what is the common tool? And you're right, cron job is where you can use this client credential. But why cron jobs? And there is one more tool which is used very commonly across developers. Postman, yes. Postman is where you want to, again, when I say machine to machine communication, right? Postman is kind of a machine, right? A system. You're trying to make a call to Ping API, SailPoint API, Savient API, Okta API. That is also a machine hosting some form of APIs. Eventually, when you're trying to talk between two different machines, this is where you term this as machine to machine authentication. Now, there are different use cases also, but to just get things right in your head, like to understand this concept, Postman is one of the good way to understand that there are two machine interacting, and the only thing you get is a very generic access token. But after getting that access token, you can go on to make further calls. It is basically, it gives you a key, and after that you can do whatever once you enter inside the house. Okay, and that is what happens, right? You make a call to the token endpoint, get the set of access token. After that, it is valid for 1 hour. You go on to making different calls, perform all the APIs, right? You call all the APIs and try to perform actions which you would do manually and automate that using the API. That is how the generic framework of API works in Postman. So here also, the first thing that they would do is they would make a call, client making a call and calling the token endpoint. Okay, same first flow. Now, what will they carry on here? Same client ID secret in this particular, sorry, in this particular format. This is the format, client ID secret, which is a very common. Content type will be there, which is content type equals this application xww form URL encoded. Okay. Now the request parameter here. What is grant type? Any guess? What will be the grant type?
Client secret,
Partially, you're right. Client.
client ID,
Mhm. Hint.
credential.
Yes, credentials, client credentials. Okay. What else? Client ID, client secret, then
Oh,
scope, and the resource you are trying to access. Okay, fine. After all of this, what do you get? You get a response like this. Expires in again a specific time, and all these are type of a bearer token. Fine. Now moving on to other different types of flow. I mean, we have this refresh token flow, or the way in which you can. Now, what is a refresh token flow? Can anyone tell me? Or what is a refresh token? A token? Yeah, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Anyone?
Request a new access token using refresh
Yes,
token.
yes. It helps you to request a new set of access token and refresh token before the existing token expires. Okay, and this prevents you from going in and logging in and again and again and again. Okay, so the first flow when you're trying to make a call is to the token endpoint. Because why token endpoint? Why it does not go to the auth endpoint? Can anyone tell me? Why will a refresh token go and make a call to the token endpoint first, and why not why not to the auth endpoint?
To validate the like expiry time
But
of.
why token endpoint only? Why not auth endpoint?
I think from auth endpoint it gets the code, right? Like, and then it exchanges for the token. So that's why it goes to the token to get the new token there.
Yes. Auth endpoint is not issuing the token, right? Whoever is issuing the token will go there only and then request. And
Yep.
this is the request that it would take. Okay. And again, the content type and all of that remains the same. Eventually, once, so sample request will be like this. Refresh token, grant type is a refresh token here. Okay. So again, the important part is the grant type. What is the grant type of when you're trying to request for a refresh token? The refresh token grant type is refresh underscore token. And how will the response be like? It'll be like this. Let's forget about ID token now. Okay, fine. So I think we have covered almost all the flows. Let's talk about validating a token. Okay, now what is the use case of token validation? Validation of a token. Why do token validation happen?
To make
Anyone?
sure it is not tamper.
Yes, status. Absolutely anything else? It is basically going and checking in, right? Like what the token is doing, what is the session, whether it's still active or not, right? So now for that, to check that, it makes a call to the introspection endpoint. You guys have seen about the introspection endpoint, right? So introspection endpoint is basically used to validate the token. Okay, and this is the particular endpoint. Now let's talk about again the body. Simply, if you want to check a token, you have to, I mean, for example, if you are inside a house, right? And if your parents wants to come and check, they should have the key to the house to check whether you are fine, everything is okay or not. So the first thing is to check is to client have a client ID and a secret. That is the basic thing that you'll start off with. Okay, and then the content type will be there by default. Resource type will be, so here the request parameter will be a token that you should have, which will be an access token. Value of the token is access underscore token. Okay. Then you have token type hint which will be access token again. Then the client ID by default, client secret. Okay. And then eventually once you hit this, right,
Oh,
response that you get is this. See, here you're not asking for access or anything. You're just going and checking. You don't need scope and all of this. Okay. So eventually you'll get active equals true. This is the response you're looking for. Okay. You're not requesting access. When you're requesting access, that is where scope comes into picture. But here you're simply saying, I want to check, like in refresh token, right? When you are requesting for a refresh token, you already have a set of certain values. You're just going and extending the validity of the existing access token. You're not requesting for the access again. Here you're just checking the trueness of the session, whether it is active or not. So you're introspecting, checking in. So you're just going, checking in, and the parameter that you're taking is client ID secret. You're also asked saying the token is access token. Token type hint is also access token. These are the two parameters you can use. And eventually the main response that you get is active equals true. That is the main value that you can use to check the token. Now, one thing, I don't want you guys to be very much overwhelmed saying, okay, there is so much coding and all of this and this, right? These are the different configuration that will be done on the client side. That is why I love Oauth OpenID Connect, because configuration wise, it is application. When they configure it, they'll have to make sure they are configuring all the values. Yes, I'm always there to help them and kind of make sure that they're configured correctly. When they are initiating the flow, the client is initiating the flow. So if tomorrow someone says that my app is not working, first thing I'll do is, okay, can you show me what endpoints you're calling? Because if auth endpoint, token endpoint, introspection endpoint, or any endpoint is not working, you will definitely have 100 application behind that, or 1,000 apps, right? Everything will fail. If only one app is failing, definitely means the way the call has been made is something is wrong on their side. So your job in from a troubleshooting perspective is ask them to do the part one, which is ask them to make a auth code. This is in terms of the auth code. Ask them to make a call, right, on part one, where they are making a call to the token endpoint, auth endpoint, and see if they are getting the code or not. Then part two, see if they are getting the token or not here. Okay, what type of token? Where are they failing? This is the different level of troubleshooting. Now, if they are getting the token, tell them you are getting the token, right? Why don't you fetch the information from the token? So these are the level of troubleshooting, because in SAML, right, there are different flows. Somewhere this guy is replying, the other guy is responding. So you never know, mismatch of configuration happens. Okay. And then it could be your side also, it could be other side. Here, very straightforward, because see, you cannot go and modify these things, right? You cannot go and modify any of these URLs that you have here. This is standard. You give them the standard URL, they will have to go configure it. Client ID secret is one of the component, and redirect URI is another component. There could be a mismatch again sometime in the redirect URI, but again, who's in IDP initiated? You are initiating the flow, right? Eventually in SP also you are doing the authentication. Here the client is initiating it. If it is failing, sometime if the again the error is not authentication, or then the username password could be wrong over there. But most of the time it is the client initiating, right? So if that flow is not happening, you'll have to check what are the flow configuration that you have done on your side. And most of the time, I'll not say every time, but some way or the other, the configuration on the client has some mismatch. Okay, sometimes they may have configured the client ID secret incorrectly. Sometimes they may have sent you the wrong redirect URI, or they may have configured the wrong endpoint, and hence it may not be hitting the right endpoint. So that is where all these configuration that I just talk about is on will be on the application side, will be configured there. Okay, your IDP is already ready with all the basic set of functionality. It'll be there. These are default setting. You just have to go and make sure, give them few basic credentials like client ID, secret, and configure the scopes and claims and redirect URL, and you're good from there.
Is this the client secret will be get stored in anywhere kind of repository for particular application?
Application, yes, they have to store this when they are making a call,
Okay.
and you configure it on your side, and eventually it is being stored in your configuration level. But you
No.
don't do anything with that. You are just there to validate,
Yeah,
because
you said that if the configuration level, the client secret is wrong to validate that, right? So
so I mean, I'll just repeat this. For example, you do a client, you create a client ID.
okay,
Okay, say something
okay,
test 1 2 3 and a client secret. Okay,
okay,
now you configure this. You give this information to the application team also.
okay.
App team. Similarly, in SAML, right, you were exchanging metadata, entity ID, and all of that.
Mm.
Similarly, the basic funda of any protocol to work is you create trust. For creating trust, you have to make sure that you are exchanging information. But in this case, it is not the endpoints that you see, it is the information. This is the information about the IDP, okay, which will be sent to the client. They have to configure it, and they have to make sure that they're hitting the right set of URL. On the second case, the client ID secret, this is either this will be provided by the client and you will have to go and open your configuration, set it, or you set your own standard and say we use client ID format as this. Client ID, client secret is auto generated, and you send it back to the application team and they will configure it.
Basically, this will be get generated by the IDP or should be given by the someone else.
No, that's what I said. If the application team has their own set of client ID secret, they will give it to you. You
Okay.
configure it. If they
Oh,
don't have, you have defined your own standard, right? Because organizations have a naming convention for client ID.
okay.
Sometimes they will use random. If it is random, you ask the application team. Okay, they will give it to you. You configure it. If there is no random, you set it up in your way, generate the client secret, and then give it back to the application team. They will use it.
Okay.
Either of the cases fine.
Ravi, from auditing perspective, how frequently this client ID should be rotated or changed?
Now, if you talk about again SOX and all those compliance, right? They have very strict compliance, but sometimes these application configuration gets exempted primarily because see, configuring a username and password, configuring a set of secret which is running, say, a small job, right? That also is difficult. You have to have like 90 days or 180 days, those kind of frequency. Okay, but
Mhm.
these will actually run your whole application. So imagine the effort. It is basically saying that when you configure a certificate on SAML, right? Signing certificate. A lot of the companies say that we are fine with using a self-sign certificate compared to SSL certificate because SSL certificate has 1 year validity. Self-sign, you can keep it as 5 years. Now, why they prefer self-sign is because if an organization has 1,000 apps, example, changing that itself will take you 4 months. Now, imagine a company every 4 months they are only changing the certificate. Like they need a different. It is an add-on on the cost also, and effort and resourcing, so many things, right? Same effort will go here also. If you are changing the client ID and secret every 3 months, 6 months, even 1 year, right? Yes, from a best practice, it is good to change and all of this, right? But if you are changing it, your operations team will go through a lot of churning every year. So somewhere, uh, organizations should take data based on, sorry, decisions based on data, a data driven decision, because if they see, fine, there are a lot of uh, wrong practices that is happening, right? Like implicit or password grant, these type of flows being used over the internet. In that case, yes, it is a very risky transaction. They will have to go over, do this changing of the client ID secret very often. But if they are using very secure flow, especially add on with Pixie and Depop, they really don't have to go over and change it again and again. Does that answer, Bhavin?
Sorry, yeah, I was on mute. Yeah, Ravi. So, Ravi,
Mhm.
in one following question on the same thing. So,
Yeah,
let's say instead of client secret, if we use certificate,
that
uh,
is also possible. But again, see, you can use certificate, you can use auto-generated, no secret, everything is possible. But provided your application supports it. Lot of
got
applications do not support certificate. But yes, if you want to enhance security, now there also, right, everything has a roadmap. Everything has a
right.
maturity model. Like one of the um, saying that I heard is you cannot boil the water inside the ocean by putting a stove underneath it, right? You'll have to take a bucket of water, boil them, and then go gradually. So
Yeah,
whatever problem is there, just see. Because as an engineer, as a professional, right? I mean, I myself, and I hope you also will be very tempted to implement the best world-class security that you want for your organization. That is inherent in nature, right? But when you sit and do that, there are so many considerations that you have to make. Like first of all is getting the business justification right for implementing anything, getting stakeholder buy-in. I mean, again, I
makes
mean, I
sense.
know you're working as an architect. That is why I'm talking you in that way. It is not just about this is the best way. Like passwordless is the best form of security, right? How
Yeah,
many
yeah,
organizations are using it?
yeah. And you are right. Like even for certificate also, like Google is coming with 90 days trust validity. So
Mhm.
that will make even certificate life cycle also shorter in future. Like it should be, yeah, updated
It is
90
all
days.
between security and uh, interoperability, right? Like
Yeah,
operating within team and then managing security plus ensuring both of them is helping give you user experience. Because if your operations team is not ready and they say for changing one certificate we need 3 days, user will not be waiting for 3 days to not access an application, right?
makes
So,
sense.
and if the certificate expires, then also user should not be saying that, okay, I mean, if it is down, then it's fine. We'll wait for 2, 3 days. So there are so many things that come into play when you're dealing with these things. The what I just explained on the first section when I went in technical is the how part, like what goes behind it. Yesterday I showed an application. For example, if I just quickly share my screen and I'll show you, right? Like one of the way in which you can integrate. So say you can, okay, let me stop sharing and share all of this again. Okay, so not this, stop. 1 sec. Oh, you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I go to Ghana, right? For example, log into Ghana. Now I go to login and I have multiple options. Okay. So you have Ghana, continue with Google, phone, email ID. This is where you're creating your profile inside this. Every time you log in, then you have to authenticate. But when you click on continue with Google, this is where you're authorizing. See here,
Mhm.
just copy paste this, okay? And put it somewhere in the chat for everyone's. Uh, just look at the chat. You will see you have client ID, all this, the backend thing, right? That I was talking about. Now here I'll go and click on. Uh, 1 second. I think the screen is frozen. Do you guys see choose an account?
No,
Okay, okay. I think Google has stopped this by default. Okay. So, or else let me stop and try again. Mm, Now, can you see?
yeah,
Okay.
that's
So let
it is
me.
showing consent page, right?
So this is the consent page. So if I go here, click on this, this is the copy, I mean, value that I've copied. Okay. This is the consent page. Now, what are you consenting them? We'll share your name, email address, and profile picture with Ghana.com. Okay. you confirm. So these are the scope. When I talk about scope, these are the values it is going to send to Ghana from Google. When you confirm it, it goes and creates your profile. Now, when you go to your profile, this is my email. Okay, full name, email ID, mail. That's it. Now, I've never logged into Ghana. Okay, this is the first time I'm logging in. But because of OAuth, this was possible. Now, tomorrow, if Ghana or any app that you're logging in gets compromised, your Google credentials remain the same. Only thing is they may get your Gmail ID. Okay, that you have used.
Yeah.
So this is what happened. How it happened is what I was discussing earlier. And configuration of whatever I've showed will remain on the application side, but that does not mean that you should not learn about it. You should know all of this in depth, primarily from an interview perspective, from troubleshooting perspective, when you may get to help an application team configure the setup on their side. And there are so many things that you can learn. Okay, so that is one of the main reason you should know about these flows. So with this, I'll wrap up today's session and I'll open this for question. I saw, okay, I don't see Praveen and Vinod. They were, I think, struggling to join. But let me go back to the question. Okay. Best practice, how frequently it should be rotated? Yes. Expiry like 1 year, depending on the, I think that has already been answered. Okay, yes. In CyberArk Vault, yes, they get stored there. So before we get into this, so Vinod, I just wanted to ask you, how was your experience asking question?
Yeah, it was good, Ravi. Thank you for giving the opportunity, first of all. Yeah, I think mainly he was talking about like more, it was